Welcome to True Saga TV. In 1945, a football match was played where one team had 15 players on the pitch. The referee never noticed. A player who had been sent off snuck back onto the field and kept playing. And a random spectator from the crowd replaced an injured goalkeeper mid-match, and nobody questioned it. This actually happened, and it might be the strangest football match ever played. Here's the full story. It's November 1945. World War II has just ended. The world is trying to get back to normal. And as part of a post-war goodwill tour, the Soviet club Dynamo Moscow flew to London to play a series of exhibition matches against English clubs. This was a huge deal. Soviet football was almost completely unknown in England. Nobody had seen these players before. Nobody knew what to expect. The third match of the tour was against Arsenal at Tottenham's White Hart Lane stadium. A crowd of 54,000 people showed up, and then the fog rolled in. London in November 1945 was famous for one thing: fog. Not light mist, not drizzle, the kind of thick, heavy, suffocating fog where you genuinely cannot see more than a few meters in front of you. By kickoff, the fog was already bad. By the second half, it was almost completely impossible to see from one end of the pitch to the other. Players couldn't see their teammates. The crowd couldn't see the ball. Reporters in the press box couldn't see what was happening on the pitch. And that's when things got very, very strange. With visibility at almost zero, Dynamo Moscow quietly put 3 extra players on the pitch. 15 Soviet players were now playing against Arsenal's 11. Not in a chaotic way. Calmly, deliberately. 3 players simply walked on from the sidelines during the fog and joined the game. The referee saw nothing. Arsenal's players couldn't see far enough to count how many opponents were around them. The crowd couldn't see. The linesmen couldn't see. Dynamo Moscow played 15 against 11 for a significant portion of the second half. The match still finished. The result, a 4-3 win for Arsenal, still stood. Nobody was ever punished. But it gets stranger. Earlier in the match, an Arsenal player named Jimmy Bakouzi had been involved in a collision and left the field injured. He never officially came back. Another Arsenal player, Reg Lewis, had been shown off the field after a dispute. He was done for the day. But in the fog, both men reportedly crept back onto the pitch and continued playing. Whether Arsenal deliberately sent them back on, or whether they just wandered back in the confusion, nobody could confirm. At certain points in the second half, it's possible both teams had the wrong number of players on the field simultaneously. Then the goalkeeper incident happened. Arsenal's first-choice goalkeeper was struck in the head mid-match and couldn't continue. A replacement was needed immediately. What happened next depends on which version of the story you believe. Some accounts say a spare Arsenal reserve ran on to help. Other accounts, including reports from journalists present that day, suggest the man who pulled on the goalkeeper jersey and kept goal for the remainder of the match was not a registered player at all. He was a man from the crowd, an ordinary spectator who had come to watch the game, ended up standing in goal, and left when the final whistle blew. There is no confirmed name, no record of who he was. He just appeared, did his job, and disappeared back into the fog. After the match, the Soviet delegation said nothing publicly about the extra players. Arsenal said nothing. FIFA said nothing. It was 1945. Europe was still rebuilding from the war. A strange fog match didn't feel like the biggest priority. The English press reported on the goals, the crowd, and the post-war atmosphere. The extra players were mentioned almost as a footnote, treated more as a bizarre fog-related curiosity than a serious breach of the rules. And over the following decades, the story faded almost completely from public memory. Here's what makes this story so fascinating when you think about it properly. Football's entire structure, the rules, the positions, the formations, is built on one assumption: 11 players per side. That's it. That's the foundation of everything. Remove that assumption, and the whole system collapses. 11 defenders against 15 attackers isn't a fair contest. It isn't even the same sport. The spatial logic, the defensive coverage, the way passes and runs work, all of it assumes an even number on each side. Dynamo Moscow didn't just bend a rule that day. They broke the most fundamental condition the entire game is built on. And the fog hid it perfectly. The 1945 Dynamo Moscow tour is actually well documented in sports history. The fog match is real. The crowd figures are confirmed. The goalkeeper incident has been reported in multiple historical accounts. What nobody ever fully resolved was exactly how many extra players were on the pitch, for how long, and whether the Soviet coaching staff deliberately instructed them to walk on, or whether confused substitutes simply failed to come off in the chaos. It's one of those moments where the truth is strange enough that it doesn't need exaggerating. Football sells itself as the beautiful game. 11 against 11. Pure competition. May the best team win. But in November 1945, in a fog so thick you couldn't see your own teammates, the most important rule in the sport was broken in front of 54,000 people. And nobody noticed a thing. If this is the kind of football story you never knew existed, subscribe. Because the history of this sport is full of moments exactly like this one. Strange, forgotten, and completely real.